Elijah, when desperation meets a God who hears. Before the fire, before Mount Carmel, before the drought broke, Elijah lived in hiding. Not in a palace, not in a temple, but in the humble home of a widow and her son. God had sent him there, and day by day they survived together, miraculously on a jar of flour and a jug of oil that never ran out. But then tragedy struck. The boy got sick, very sick, and then he stopped breathing. The widow turned on Elijah in agony. "What do you have against me, man of God? Did you come to remind me of my sin and kill my son?" Elijah had no answers. He didn't argue, he didn't preach. He took the boy's lifeless body from her arms, carried him upstairs to the room he was staying in, and laid him on the bed. Then he cried out, not once, but 3 times. "O Lord my God, have you brought tragedy even on this widow I'm staying with by causing her son to die?" Then he stretched himself over the boy and prayed a prayer few would dare to speak. "O Lord my God, let this boy's life return to him," and heaven heard. Breath returned. The child lived again. Elijah picked him up, carried him downstairs, and placed him back in his mother's arms. "Look, your son is alive." And in that moment, a grieving mother became a believer. "Now I know. You are a man of God, and the word of the Lord from your mouth is the truth." This story teaches us. Miracles don't always happen on public stages. Sometimes they happen in quiet rooms where hearts are breaking. You don't need the right words, you just need real faith. And when everything feels lost, God still listens to desperate prayers. Elijah didn't raise the boy because he was strong. He raised him because he was bold enough to ask. Maybe you've lost something, or someone. Maybe you're holding grief in your hands and wondering if God still sees you. Cry out, not perfectly, just honestly. Take your pain upstairs, lay it before the Lord, and ask, because he is still the God who restores breath to broken things. Next story is about Elisha, when the mantle falls and it's your turn to stand. The end was near. Elijah knew it. So did Elisha. But Elisha didn't want to let go. He had followed the prophet for years, served him, learned from him, watched fire fall and the heavens shut. Now the man of God would soon be taken, and Elisha wasn't about to miss it. They walked from Gilgal to Bethel, from Bethel to Jericho, from Jericho to the Jordan. At every stop, Elijah tested him. "Stay here. The Lord is sending me farther." But Elisha replied every time, "As surely as the Lord lives and you live, I will not leave you." He wasn't just loyal, he was determined. He knew that to receive a double portion, he had to remain close until the end. Then when they reached the Jordan River, Elijah took off his cloak, his mantle, rolled it up, and struck the water. The river split. They crossed on dry ground. Then Elijah asked, "What do you want me to do for you before I am taken?" And Elisha didn't hesitate. "Let me inherit a double portion of your spirit." Elijah replied, "You've asked a hard thing. But if you see me when I'm taken from you, it will be yours." And then it happened. A chariot of fire drawn by horses of fire came between them. And Elijah was taken up into heaven in a whirlwind. No death, no burial, just glory. Elisha tore his clothes in grief, but then he saw it. The mantle lying on the ground. He picked it up, and now it was his turn. He returned to the Jordan River, stood before the rushing waters, and cried out, "Where now is the Lord, the God of Elijah?" Then he struck the water with the mantle, and once again the river parted. Not for Elijah, but for Elisha, because the same God was still with him. This story teaches us. The end of one chapter is the beginning of another. You don't need to become the person who led you. You need to carry their spirit with your own obedience. And if you want the mantle, you must stay close long enough to catch it. Elisha didn't become great because of one moment. He became great because he stayed. He didn't quit when the journey got long. He didn't shrink when the cloak fell. He stood up and stepped forward. Thought maybe someone ahead of you is leaving. A mentor, a guide. Maybe your next chapter feels too big to walk into, but the same God who parted the river for them can part it for you. Pick up the mantle, speak with your own voice, and cross in your own calling. Not like this story if you believe God still passes the mantle to the next generation. Share it with someone ready to step into their purpose. Subscribe for more true stories where obedience turns transition into legacy.
Following is the story about Elisha, when God gives and gives again. She wasn't poor. She had wealth, land, and status. But there was one thing she didn't have: a child. She was the Shunammite woman, strong, generous, and full of quiet dignity. And whenever the prophet Elisha passed through her town, she offered him food, rest, and a room of his own, not to earn a miracle, just out of kindness. One day, Elisha asked his servant, "What can be done for her?" And the servant whispered, "She has no son, and her husband is old." So Elisha called her in and said, "This time next year you will hold a son in your arms." She gasped, "No, my lord. Please don't mislead your servant." But God had already spoken. And just as Elisha said, the child came. After years passed, the boy grew. Then one day, out in the field with his father, he cried out, "My head, my head." He was carried home, sat on his mother's lap, and by noon he died. Just like that. The miracle she never dared ask for was now gone. She didn't scream. She didn't collapse. She carried him to the prophet's room upstairs, laid him on the bed, and shut the door. Then she saddled a donkey and told her servant, "Don't slow down unless I say so." She rode to Elisha. When he saw her coming, he sent his servant ahead. "Is everything all right?" She answered only, "It is well." But when she reached Elisha, she fell at his feet and cried, "Did I ask you for a son? Didn't I say don't raise my hopes?" Elisha rushed to her house. He went to the room, closed the door, and prayed. Then he stretched himself over the boy, eyes to eyes, hands to hands, mouth to mouth. The body grew warm, but life had not returned. Elisha walked the room, prayed again, and repeated the act. Then suddenly, the boy sneezed 7 times and opened his eyes. Elisha called the woman. "Take your son." She came in, fell at his feet, then held her child in her arms, alive again. This story teaches us, not all pain comes from poverty. Some comes after the very thing you prayed for dies in your hands. When hope dies, faith doesn't need answers. It needs a place to run to. And God not only gives life, He can restore it when it's gone. The Shunammite woman didn't rage. She didn't announce the death. She laid the pain in the same room where the promise was made. And God honored her faith. Maybe today you feel like her. You once held a promise, now you're holding silence. Take it back to the place where it began. Don't run from God, run to Him, because the same God who gave can give again. Like this story, if you believe God still restores what feels dead, share it with someone clinging to silent hope. Subscribe for more true stories where heartbreak meets the God who answers beyond the grave.
Next story is about Elisha when healing hides in humility. Naaman had it all: power, honor, victory. He was the commander of the Syrian army, respected, revered, unstoppable in battle. But under his shining armor was a secret. Leprosy, a slow, shaming disease, a sentence of isolation, and no one, no rank, no riches could protect him from it. One day, a voice of hope came from the most unlikely place: a young girl, a captive servant, an Israelite taken from her home. She said to Naaman's wife, "If only my master would go see the prophet in Samaria, he could heal him." Desperate, Naaman went to his king, who sent him with silver, gold, fine clothing, and a letter to the king of Israel. But the king panicked. "Am I God? Can I kill and bring back to life?" Then Elisha sent word, "Let him come to me. He will know there is a prophet in Israel." Naaman arrived at Elisha's house with horses, chariots, and impressive entourage. But Elisha didn't even come to the door. He sent a messenger with one simple instruction: "Go wash yourself 7 times in the Jordan River. Your flesh will be restored." Naaman was furious. "That's it? I thought he would come out, stand and call on his God, wave his hand over me. Aren't the rivers of Damascus better than any river in Israel?" He turned away in rage, because pride often expects healing on its own terms. But one of his servants gently said, "If the prophet had told you to do something great, wouldn't you have done it? How much more when he simply says, 'Wash and be clean'?" Naaman paused, listened, then obeyed. He stepped into the muddy waters of the Jordan, dipped once, twice, 5 times, 6. And on the 7th, his skin was restored like that of a child, clean, whole, new. Naaman rushed back to Elisha's home. This time, no pride, just gratitude. Now I know. There is no God in all the world except in Israel. He offered gifts Elisha refused, because this wasn't about profit, it was about presence. This story teaches us, sometimes the path to healing feels too ordinary, but obedience is the bridge between pain and restoration. God doesn't always answer with drama. Sometimes he answers in muddy water and quiet surrender. And often the miracle you seek is on the other side of a humbled heart. Naaman thought he needed performance. What he really needed was trust. Oh, maybe you've prayed for healing, for breakthrough, and the answer feels too simple, too humble. Don't miss your miracle because of pride. If God says go, go, even if it means stepping into something that doesn't make sense. Because he's not asking you to understand it. He's asking you to trust him through it. And like this story, if you believe real healing comes through humility, share it with someone waiting on a miracle. Subscribe for more true stories where faith walks through rivers and comes out whole.
Now is another wisdom story about Elisha, when God cares about what you lost. They were building something new. The company of the prophets had grown. Too many students, too little space. So they asked Elisha, "Let us go to the Jordan and build a place to live." He said yes. They took their tools, their plans, their hope, and they started cutting down trees. Then it happened. One man swinging his axe suddenly cried out, "Oh no, my lord, it was borrowed." The axe head had flown off the handle, sunk deep into the Jordan River. Gone, not just a tool, not just metal, it represented someone else's trust. And now it was lost. And this man didn't have wealth. He couldn't replace what he borrowed. This wasn't a disaster, but it was a real need. So he turned to Elisha. Elisha didn't laugh, didn't rebuke him. He asked simply, "Where did it fall?" They walked to the spot. Elisha cut a stick, threw it into the water, and the iron floated. Iron floated, no fire, no storm, just quiet redemption. Elisha said, "Lift it out." The man reached down and took back what he thought was lost forever. Now this story teaches us, no concern is too small for God. If it matters to you, it matters to him. Borrowed burdens still belong to his grace. And sometimes the greatest miracle is not parting a sea, but restoring what you didn't think you'd get back. Elisha didn't summon armies. He didn't raise the dead. He helped a man recover an axe head because the man had a heart humble enough to say, "I lost it, and it wasn't even mine." And God showed up in honesty. Well, maybe you're here today carrying a quiet loss. Not dramatic, not life-threatening, but it still hurts, it still matters. You didn't mean to lose it. The peace, the trust, the calling, the chance. And it wasn't even fully yours to begin with. Bring it to God anyway, because he still knows where it fell. And he can still make what sank on rise. You know I'll like this story if you believe God restores what we think is gone. Share it with someone silently grieving something small. Subscribe for more true stories where God moves in whispers and lifts the weight of borrowed burdens.